Good evening and welcome to RADTV at 5:25 on CCTV, Chittenden County Channel 17, Centre for Media and Democracy and Town Meeting Television. For those who haven't seen our show before, RAD stands for Rights and Democracy, a grassroots people-powered organisation committed to creating independent political movement for long-lasting fundamental change in Vermont and New Hampshire. This is a call-in show, and feel free to give us a call if you wish. The number is 802-862-3966, so we welcome any questions if any pop up. And please consider donating to RAD through radvt.org or radnh.org. And be sure to watch our show on the fourth Friday of every month. Obviously tonight is on a Tuesday, so it's a special show, but you can catch us next month as well on the 30th of August. I'm your host for this evening, Tom Proctor, and our topic tonight is the $15 minimum wage and paid family leave. What happened and where do we go from here? At the end of May, Democrats and progressives snatched defeat from the jaws of victory when two important bills raising the minimum wage to $15 per hour and paid family leave in Vermont failed to be agreed upon by the House and the Senate, both effectively dying in the 2019 session when House Leader Mitzi Johnson gavelled out the House after declaring an impasse on the bills. This evening we'll be discussing what this means for the fate of the two bills, how this will affect Vermont Democrats and progressives in 2020, and where the fight for $15 per hour and paid family leave is heading now. The guests we have this evening are Kate Logan, Director of Programming and Policy at RAD.
Hi, I'm Kate Logan. I'm Director of Programming and Policy at Rights and Democracy. I have a background in community, student, and labor organizing, teaching, as well as all but dissertation as a feminist, social, and political theorist. I moved to Vermont permanently about 3 years ago, became a member of Rights and Democracy the next week, joined the leadership committee, then the board, and then came on staff in December of 2017, and have been involved in Rights and Democracy's efforts in raising the minimum wage and passing paid family and medical leave insurance ever since.
And we have Joshua Wronski, Executive Director of the Vermont Progressive Party.
Hi, Tom. Thanks for having me on. So I'm the director of the Vermont Progressive Party. We are arguably the most successful third party in Vermont. I have a background in low-income tenant organizing, in union organizing, and in political organizing. And this is really close to my heart. As a union organizer, I spent many hundreds of hours working to boost wages and achieve benefits in the workplace for working class people. And I see this issue as a great way to extend that into Vermont for all workers.
And finally, we have Representative Tom Stevens, Chair of the General Housing and Military Affairs in the House.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Thanks for having us. Representative Tom Stevens from Waterbury. I represent Waterbury, Bolton, Huntington, and Beals Gore. I straddle the two Chittenden County and Washington County lines in my district, and this is my sixth term. And this is my first year as chair of the committee. We took on, and our committee is the committee where these two bills started their journey in the House, and from where we ended up with some pretty distinct differences, not only within our own part of the House, but also with the Senate. I've served, again, like I said, for 11 years now, come to this as a former stay-at-home dad, former bartender, former proofreader, former writer, former actor, former, lots of formers, but have really enjoyed my time in the House and doing the kind of work that we're doing for Vermonters, not only in my district, but statewide. And because this is RADTV, I think I can point out that I've been endorsed twice by RAD in the last two elections.
Wonderful. Yeah. And thank you all for coming on the show this evening. I really appreciate you taking the time out to be here. My first question is going to go to you, Kate. One of RAD's signature initiatives is passing the $15 minimum wage and establishing paid family leave, as you kindly mentioned. So what work did you put in to get the bills as far as they did, and what was your reaction when they did not come to pass in the legislature?
Yeah, thanks. Both minimum wage and paid family and medical leave insurance are part of our Raise Up Vermont campaign, along with some other workers' rights protections that we're fighting for as well. Rights and Democracy was built to operate with what we call a whole movement theory of change, using all the tools in the social change toolbox to create effective, long-lasting change in our communities. So we do organizing, we mobilize folks, we do policy research and advocacy, strategic communications, electoral politics, what we call movement politics, coalition building, and we back it all up with strong operations. So we've built the Raise Up Vermont campaign using all of these tools. We've been organizing around these issues for a few years now. We started with the study on the minimum wage, back in 2015, involved in making sure that the right community voices were heard in that process. We've been organizing throughout the state for a few years now, canvassing, phone banking, tabling, hosting community events. In the past year, we've held 9 community town halls around an economy for all of us, along with the Lieutenant Governor and many other C3 organizations, to bring these issues to a broader community discussion. We've done policy research and advocacy, so we've made it an effort to educate our communities and our legislators around the specifics of these bills, how they'll support families, particularly with the minimum wage, making sure that folks understand that $15 in 2024 is barely enough for childless folks sharing a 1-bedroom apartment to be able to afford to pay their bills with no social services. In terms of strategic communications, we've published over 60 original op-eds in every newspaper outlet and Front Porch Forum throughout the state by coalition members, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment, but a lot of community advocates and impacted folks who have spoken out to their communities in the form of op-eds and letters to the editor. One of the things that I think as the Raise the Wage Coalition that we're proudest about from this legislative session is really shifting the conversation for Vermont a little bit away from 15 as the goal and more towards a base livable wage as our minimum wage standard in the state, following the state's own policy on the livable wage that was the result of years of advocacy over 20 years ago. And of course, electoral politics is a big part of the work that we do. Last year, we put a lot of effort into recruiting, training, and endorsing candidates, and then invested in the second half of the year most of our organizing efforts towards supporting the campaigns of some new movement leaders like Representatives Mari Cordes, Bob Hooper, Emily Kornheiser, Logan Nicole, Mike McCarthy, and some near misses like the re-election of Susan Hatch Davis, and new folks like Jeremy Hansen, Kate LaRose, Tanya Vyhovsky, Marina Mirberg, Barb Wilson, and Tim Giles. A lot of folks stepping up to lead with strong, progressive, values, and really proud to support those campaigns, and so happy to get to work with some of those folks in the State House this year. We also became friends with Senator Cheryl Hooker and a couple of other new senators who came in this year as well. And then a large part of the work that we've done on this campaign has been to be an organizing partner with the Family Coalition, about 30 organizations supporting paid family and medical leave insurance, and then serving as the co-facilitator for the Raise the Wage Coalition along with Vermont Interfaith Action. And there we have shared the burden of organizing around this issue. VIA has organizers in Washington and Windham counties, and we are organizing in Bennington, Rutland, Addison, Chittenden, and Franklin counties.
Wow, it's quite a list there of the work that RAD does. Representative Tom Stevens, from your point of view, Why did you feel that these bills did not go over the line? What were the differences in opinion that halted two bills that Democrats have long supported?
We just have 20 minutes.
Just have 20 minutes.
There's two things to remember, I think, for minimum wage and family leave. I mean, there's the internecine battle between Democrats, progressives, Republicans within the House itself. Then there's the House and the Senate. The Senate keyed in more on minimum wage this year than it did on family medical leave insurance. But at one point we were in the same place on both issues. And then as the session went on, we kind of drifted apart. And part of that, I think, has to do with just the interpretation of what the work is, of what we were striving to do and how we were going to get there. For instance, minimum wage came to us. We ended up passing that out of our committee, but our committee is only one part of the process. What we also added in was the concerns of members of the House about, well, who's earning this money? Who pays for that salary? Is it the state? Are they providing services to the disabled, to the elderly, to the people that we really want to take care of? And it became clear that this state, when we talk about it being unaffordable, is unaffordable because there's 225,000 Vermonters who file taxes less than $47,000 a year, and 144,000 less than $27,000 a year. That's a huge amount of people that we're really taking care of, and so raising up the minimum wage traditionally, historically, is the hardest thing for people to do. People in general, that establishment has a hard time raising the salary of the poorest people in the state of Vermont. That's just a normal, as we see it across the country as well. I mean, we're still going to give the minimum wage a raise in January, but it's nowhere near what's necessary, and that's why we're fighting. We're going to continue to fight for 15. I get the livable wage portion of it. It's again, we don't have 20 minutes to talk about this particular question, but I think in the end, the Senate had their priority of the minimum wage, and the House had a priority of family medical leave insurance and the minimum wage. But by the time the bills passed through, my committee went into other committees, went over to the Senate in the case of family medical leave. Changes happened that were really disappointing, but that's the nature of a democracy. That's unfortunately the nature of a democracy when it comes to being so disappointed in that it didn't pass. What I'll say positively about neither of those bills passing in the first year of the biennium is that they weren't damaged. I mean, we passed bills that no one was happy with. No one on the left side, center-left, progressive side of the spectrum was happy with either one of those bills and how they got voted out. But because we didn't get them, and this is definitely 2020, but because they didn't go onto the desk to be vetoed, we're going to be able to come back in January and work on these bills from a stronger position. We know what didn't work. We know what upset people. And as the speaker said to me after we gavelled out, is like, my committee's got a full dance card already in January. We have two incredibly important bills that are on the top of the list, along with a few others that we didn't get to this year, that we're going to really push hard. But we have this incredible amount of good work, hard work. Yes, it failed this year, but I think we can turn that into something really good by working with our caucus. We had so many new people in the building to learn what it was like to have a political firestorm in their faces. And we'll have a conversation with them. We'll do the work with the Senate, with the Progressive Party as our coalition. I mean, we're not a veto-proof majority. We have a large majority, but without a coalition, we're not going to get this passed. And so it's important to acknowledge the past, and then let's see what we can do moving forward, because I think we have a real foundation for pretty strong bills. And if we can do that together, then we're going to pass some pretty strong bills. And then the question will be, can we put together 100 votes when everybody's in the building?
Josh, as we saw in May, opposition to working wage and paid family leave is stronger than anticipated, even in certain areas of the Democratic Party. So how do we chart a path forward to get this passed without watering the bills down to where the impact to working families will be negligible?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. So I think just first off, I want to push back a little bit on the idea that the opposition was stronger. I think we're always expecting strong opposition. Anytime you're talking about a policy that is going to institute economic justice in Vermont or anywhere in the country, you're going to see overwhelming opposition from those who prefer the status quo. And we just have to accept that, and we have to prepare for it, and we have to organize around it. That wasn't surprising at all to me, to see the business lobby coming in and really trying to weaken this legislation. What really was surprising was how quickly a significant number of Democrats in the Vermont House really caved to that pressure, and on top of that, really worked to weaken those bills and eventually kill them, and how they oftentimes had the support from leadership in the Vermont House. That was very disappointing to me. With both paid family medical leave and the $15 minimum wage bill, we had pretty strong bills starting out. You had the PFML was a 50-50 employer-employee split to pay for it, which is much more fair than a 100% employee contribution, which is what the bill ended up as. With the $15 minimum wage, we started at $15 by 2024, which isn't even a minimum wage at that point, but it's getting us much closer, or a living wage at that point. It's getting us much closer. And by the end, we were talking about all these different formulas and different ideas that really didn't get us close to a living wage. So over the course of the session, both of these bills were watered down pretty significantly because you have this, I think, significant number of more conservative, moderate, almost a caucus within the Democratic majority that was fighting actively opposed to these important pieces of legislation for working people. So I think what we really need to look at in 2020, because the same dynamic's going to exist. These people didn't go away. I mean, you have people like Cynthia Browning, who has voted against the living wage every single time it's come up and has actively opposed it every single time it's come up. She's still going to be there proposing the same amendments that she did last time around. The same dynamics are going to exist, but we need to wake up to the fact that we can't expect the majority, the Democratic majority, to do this for us. We have to go out and organize, and we have to show up at the State House, and we have to make the phone calls and send the emails, because the business lobby is there every day doing all of that work. And unless we can provide a counterbalance to what the business lobby and what the more moderate, conservative portions of that caucus are fighting for, we're going to lose. And we have to be ready to really fight for these bills. It was really, it was one of the most disappointing days of the session was the Progressive Caucus put forward an amendment to actually reinstate the $15 minimum wage bill to $15 by 2024, as it had passed the Senate, as the House had previously voted for in a different legislative session. And what happened was the House leadership killed that. You had many, including Representative Stevens, who, you've been very supportive of $15 minimum wage. And that, in that instance, many good liberal Democrats voted against $15 by 2024, the overwhelming majority, because House leadership told them to. And that's the kind of thing we have to fight against. This is not this is not just something that's going to happen because, people ran and campaigned on it. It's something that we have to basically make a demand, and we have to go and follow through. And in 2020, if we still have the same dynamic, if these bills still aren't passed, if you still have a couple dozen Democrats in the House who are unwilling to really fight and push and vote for these pieces of legislation, we have to be prepared to challenge them and run people who are going to get the job done.
Well, Kate, kind of following from that, is that RAD's point of view as well? Is the way to push both these bills over the line in the 2020 session a combination of public pressure and turning up to the State House and protesting outside, sending emails, and then secondary to that, maybe primarying those who vote against it?
Well, okay. I wasn't expecting that question exactly. So I would say yes, in general. I think we just need to be able to do more of what we have already been doing. I already described the kind of program we've been running around these campaigns for the last few years. And I think the only thing we lack is more of it at this point. I also think that there were a lot of folks within the Democratic Party and even within our own coalition. The Raise the Wage Coalition has over 30 members, labor, social and economic justice organizations. And I think a lot of folks, even in our own coalition, were surprised that things didn't get across the line this year after we went into the legislative session with a so-called veto-proof coalition or majority. And so I think from my discussions with coalition members over the last couple months, my understanding is that they really have come to grips with the idea that they're going to have to organize around this, and we're putting those plans together now. I think legislators who are a little fearful of passing progressive economic justice legislation like this need to hear from impacted folks in their communities. Those people, to the extent that they're even able to, given the sort of economic pressures that they're under in their day-to-day lives, need to somehow be visible in the State House a little bit more this year. And sure, if we have folks who are representing districts where the vast majority of their constituents support passing an increased minimum wage, that gets us to a base livable wage in Vermont and creates a paid family and medical leave insurance program. Yes, if we can recruit, train, and endorse a candidate in that district, we'll throw our support behind them. I don't think there's any question about it. I think what my own experience has shown in field work over the last few years is that every community that I've been in, at least 51% of the folks that we've spoken with support these ideas. Oftentimes, especially from more impacted communities, I'd say those aren't the folks who are voting. So I think that's another aspect of the program we need to run over the next year, is ensuring really, really strong voter turnout. And I think we can expect that already in 2020, but I think we need to be registering voters as well, especially low-income voters who probably traditionally feel underrepresented by their legislators and maybe a little less likely to vote as a result. And this is the year, especially with the presidential election and the gubernatorial election we have this year, to register voters and turn them out if need be.
Representative Stevens, it's been reported there'll be quick actions, as you've mentioned, in 2020. As you said, you got a full card as you come in January. Why don't you feel you're going to see the same problems again as it's already been discussed around this table tonight?
Well, two reasons. Let me just respond also to the idea of primarying just Democrats here. I mean, there's been polling that led up to the election, even prior to the progressive people who did get elected, progressively minded people that got elected in 2018, that showed that 80 some odd % of Democrats polled supported the minimum wage, only 80%. And I think our votes, and I'm not excusing the people who voted for it, but again, it represented that view. It kind of held true to that poll that over 80% of our people still voted, or about 80% of our people still voted for those bills. But that same poll also showed that 20% of Republicans in the state supported raising the minimum wage and supporting those bills. And I know that in our party, we are working towards not primarying, but challenging people in Republican districts. Because if 20% of the Republicans did not vote in lockstep with their leader, then we would have had 8 or 9 other votes. There are plenty of people who are making minimum wage in the red districts, the Northeast and Northwest Kingdoms, and in Rutland are the primary red areas. There's plenty of people who are making far less than they should be, and yet they're not voting. Their representatives are not voting. So I'm going to deflect any kind of progressive primarying Democrats, making them better Democrats. I think people need to answer for their record. There's no question. So if that happens, then the people that are being primaried will have to answer for their records. But as a Democratic Party, we're going to focus on the Republican districts, because that's the easiest way to gain seats, especially when we have such a broad tent like we do. How will it be different? I think we had 30 people who are new to the Democratic caucus this past year. That's 30 people out of the 95. That's almost a third of the representatives had never been through a political process where they were put through the grinder of being told that they're not sufficiently good Democrats, or that they thought maybe I am pretty liberal, but wait, this is a tough issue for my district. And no matter how many times someone like me could say, well, we know that management takes advantage of labor all the time. That it's like we're not against that, but getting there was really difficult. I think, and I hope in our conversations this summer with other caucus members, especially people who could not find the way to vote for it yet. Again, we had a near veto-proof majority on family and medical leave of the bill that left the House, not of the bill that came back from the Senate. So this is the politics part of it, and we want to craft something that's strong. And again, I'll say the fact that we ended up with 2 bills that we did not like at the end of last year, I'm happy that they didn't get vetoed, because again, we can approach this now with a bill that's not damaged by expectations. And the expectations that I have as a chair of my committee and as in leadership of our caucus is to keep promoting the strongest possible bill possible. Can we get there? Again, when people see what we did and what happened to those bills over the course of time, I think maybe we'll get a better understanding of what we're trying to do. And generally speaking, most of the Democrats who voted against it, not all of them, have spoken in the past very eloquently about supporting the 144,000 Vermonters who file taxes for less than $27,000 a year. I mean, that's who we're fighting for, and we'll continue that fight. So there's no promises. Compromise is tough. The opposing advocacy groups and lobbyists are very, very strong in that building. With this administration, we have to have 100 votes to override a veto, and we didn't have that this year. We couldn't put together 100 people in June, due to surgeries or cancer treatments or vacations or things like that. And so, rather than damage it with a bill, and I will gladly say that's a positive spin on what happened, but I'd rather try to get an understanding not only in our own caucus in the House, but also with the Senate. We had members of the Senate who came out against family and medical leave insurance and said that this was not necessary in Vermont, that minimum wage was enough. I mean, these were Democrats and progressive senators not supporting family medical leave insurance, and you're kind of like, well, wait a minute, where's that cutoff? And to me, that's communication. I think they have the best interests of not only their constituents, but of Vermonters in mind. We did too. We just did different levels of hard work on each of the separate bills, and I think if we can work towards a positive bill rather than zombie bills, as one of my committee mates called them, then we're going to turn out better work, and we're going to have a stronger coalition moving forward. I believe that, and I'm going to work with that, and I'm going to work with that from now until January, and then once we sit down again in January and really make sure that we get a strong pair of bills together, because you take family medical leave insurance, it pays for itself for the people who are getting a raise with the minimum wage, and it benefits mostly those same people. So it's just, they should come in tandem, and they should be really strong.
Well, I look forward to seeing what happens in 2020. Thank you guys all so much for coming in the show. Unfortunately, we've got no more time this evening. Before I leave you, a note from RAD. Please help us continue to grow and win. You can become a sustaining member of Rights and Democracy and help us push progressive values over Vermont and New Hampshire. Become a sustaining member today by visiting radvt.org or radnh.org. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you again next month right back here on Channel 17 on August 30th, live at 5:25. Thanks very much for watching. Good night.